Psychology of struggles only high IQ people face. Most people think high intelligence makes life easier, and in some ways it does. Psychologists are clear that intelligence matters. IQ and cognitive ability are meaningfully linked to educational success and a range of positive life outcomes. But psychology is also clear about something else. IQ is not the whole person. Even the APA notes that IQ tests compare intellectual performance, but that they do not measure every kind of human ability, including things like social intelligence. So the real story is more complicated than most people think. Because for some people, the very thing that helps them see more clearly also makes life harder to inhabit. They notice more, they question more, they replay more, they anticipate more. And after a while, that can create a very specific kind of struggle. Not the struggle of not understanding enough, but the struggle of understanding too much without always knowing how to live peacefully with what they understand. So in this video, we are not going to romanticize high IQ. We are not going to turn intelligence into an ego trophy. We are going to talk honestly about the psychological struggles that can show up when a mind is fast, deep, analytical, and hard to switch off. Because if this is you, the goal is not just to feel seen. The goal is to understand what is happening inside you well enough to change how you live with it. The first struggle is the burden of a mind that rarely goes quiet. One of the most painful things about high cognitive ability is that it can look like strength from the outside while feeling like pressure from the inside. A fast mind can generate possibilities, counter-arguments, simulations, and future scenarios with unusual speed. That is useful when solving problems. But it can become exhausting when the problem is your own life. Research on intelligence and mental health does not support the stereotype that highly intelligent people are simply more disordered overall. In fact, a large study found high intelligence was not associated with greater rates of mental disorders, and it may even be protective for general anxiety and PTSD. But that does not mean people with high intelligence never suffer. It means the suffering is often more about mismatch, perfectionistic stress, chronic mental overactivity, and how that mind is managed. That is why some highly intelligent people do not feel weak. They feel overclocked. Their mind does not simply think. It keeps running simulations long after the moment is over. And that is where overthinking becomes dangerous. Not because reflection is bad, but because reflection without boundaries turns clarity into paralysis. The second struggle is loneliness that does not look like loneliness. A lot of people assume loneliness means having no one around, but that is not always the deepest form of loneliness. Sometimes the deeper loneliness is being surrounded by people and still feeling mentally unseen. Historically, psychologists who studied giftedness noticed this communication gap early. More recent work on gifted adults also suggests that well-being is shaped not just by intelligence itself, but by whether a person's environment fits their internal life. In other words, the problem is not always the mind alone. The problem is often the relationship between that mind and the world it has to live in. This is why small talk can feel strangely draining for some high IQ people. It is not always arrogance. It is often hunger. A hunger for depth, coherence, real curiosity, and conversations that actually go somewhere. When a person lives with that hunger for years, they can start believing something is wrong with them. But sometimes nothing is wrong. Sometimes they are simply living with a level of cognitive intensity that is not easily met in everyday interaction. The third struggle is boredom that cuts deeper than people realize. Many people think boredom is laziness, but for intellectually gifted people, boredom is often a signal of under-challenge. Research with gifted students repeatedly points to this issue. Studies have found that when highly able students are not properly challenged, boredom can become a real problem, and that appropriate enrichment and differentiated challenge can help prevent boredom and underachievement. A recent meta-analysis also found that enrichment programs for gifted students had a large positive effect on cognitive skills and meaningful positive effects on personal and social-emotional development. That matters because a bright mind does not only need stimulation. It needs the right kind of stimulation, not endless noise, not constant busyness, but difficulty with meaning, a problem worth solving, a question worth following. A challenge that stretches identity, not just attention. Without that, many intelligent people do not become peaceful. They become restless. The fourth struggle is perfectionism disguised as potential. This is one of the biggest traps. People assume highly intelligent individuals should do well because things come naturally to them. But that exact expectation can quietly become a prison. Recent research on adolescents with high intellectual ability found higher levels of perfectionism in the high-ability groups. Another 2025 study of gifted students found that when these students expected themselves to perform perfectly or felt that others expected perfection from them, stress went up, and as stress rose, burnout increased while engagement dropped. That is a critical psychological insight. Perfectionism can briefly energize performance, but under stress, it also becomes a pathway to exhaustion. This is why some high IQ people do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because ability got fused to self-worth. And once that happens, every mistake feels like exposure. Every delay feels like inadequacy. Every as imperfect outcome feels like proof that they are wasting what they were supposed to become. That is not healthy ambition. That is fear wearing the mask of excellence. The fifth struggle is confusing intelligence with self-management. This one is crucial. Being able to think well is not the same as being able to regulate emotion. Tolerate boredom. Stay consistent, or finish long-term work. Your mind can be brilliant and still be poorly governed. Psychological research keeps pointing to this broader picture. Life outcomes are shaped by more than cognitive ability alone. Self-perceived ability. Motivation. School behaviors and emotional competencies also matter. A PA-reviewed work has even found that emotional intelligence predicts academic performance, while other research shows school behaviors and interests predict later success above and beyond IQ. That means raw intelligence is real, but it is not enough. And this is where many intelligent people get trapped. They can design a perfect system, but they cannot always live inside it. They can imagine the ideal future, but they cannot always tolerate the slow, repetitive, imperfect behavior required to build it. So they begin to wonder, if I'm so capable, why am I still stuck? And the answer is often this: because insight is not the same as execution. The sixth struggle is analysis paralysis. Highly intelligent people often see too many variables at once, too many consequences, too many interpretations, too many ways things could go right, too many ways they could go wrong. And when the mind can model 10 futures, commitment starts to feel dangerous. So they wait, they refine, they think again, they try to choose the perfect path. But life rarely rewards perfect internal modeling. Life rewards movement. A good decision made in time is often more powerful than a perfect decision delayed into irrelevance. The seventh struggle is the search for meaning. This part is rarely talked about enough. Some intelligent people do not suffer mainly because they are anxious or misunderstood. They suffer because ordinary forms of success stop feeling sufficient. Research on gifted adults suggests that meaning in life is especially important for their well-being. In one longitudinal study, gifted adults who lived more generatively, meaning they directed their gifts toward the good of others, experienced greater meaning, and through that, greater subjective well-being over time. The same study found self-control strengthened that relationship for intellectually gifted adults. In plain English, meaning helped and disciplined action helped translate meaning into a happier life. That is such an important corrective, because many intelligent people spend years trying to solve the wrong problem. They think they need more achievement, more recognition, more proof, when what they may really need is a reason their intelligence serves something beyond self-measurement. Because a brilliant mind without meaning does not become free. It becomes hungry. So what do you do if you recognize yourself in this? Here are 4 practical shifts. First, stop using IQ as your identity. Your intelligence is real, but it is not your entire value. If you build your self-worth on being sharp, you will experience every ordinary human limitation as humiliation. Replace the question, "How smart am I?" with "How am I using my mind?" That question is healthier, more mature, and far more useful. Second, put boundaries around thinking. Give yourself a 15-minute thinking window when something is bothering you. Write down the problem, the likely options, and the next concrete step. Then stop, not because thought is bad, but because uncontained thought expands forever. High IQ people often do not need more analysis. They need a stopping rule. Third, turn perfection into process. Use this sequence draft, then improve, then refine. Not perfect, then start. If you wait to act until your work matches the version in your head, you will spend years admiring potential and fearing reality. Fourth, build a life with both challenge and meaning. Not just stimulation, not just productivity. Choose one problem that stretches you and one contribution that makes you feel useful beyond yourself. The research on gifted adults points in a very clear direction here. Meaning and self-regulation matter. Intelligence becomes healthier when it is aimed, embodied, and connected to something larger. So if you have ever felt like your mind is both your gift and your burden, hear this carefully. You are not broken because life feels mentally loud. You are not failing because shallow environments do not nourish you. You are not weak because potential alone did not save you. A powerful mind is still just one part of a human being. And the real work of maturity is not becoming less intelligent. It is becoming wise enough to build a life your intelligence does not constantly sabotage. Because the goal is not to think less deeply. The goal is to suffer less from the depth with which you think. And maybe that is the shift that matters most. Not proving that you are exceptional, but learning how to become peaceful, useful, and fully alive inside the mind you already have.